How are you? Welcome to the video. I'm Dying Legacy and this is the Shade build, a stamina Nightblade for solo content, and it's freshly updated for patch 36. Packing strong damage and high AoE, you'll be tackling veteran arenas and dungeons with no effort, and it's a whole lot of fun. This is a quick build guide. We'll be going over the race, attributes, Munda stones, food, potions, gear, skills, passives and champion point slottables. The info will be minimal, so I'll only be going over what's necessary. However, do feel free to comment below if you have any questions, suggestions, or if there's anything I could do better. And if you enjoy it, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe for more. With the intro covered, let's go over the Shade build. Starting with the race, it doesn't really matter what you use, enjoy the game first and play as you prefer. Some races do perform slightly better than others, and here are my suggestions. I would recommend either the Red Guard if you're looking for more sustain, the Khajiit for extra critical damage, or an Orc for extra weapon damage. For the attributes, we're putting 64 points into stamina, and for our Munda stone, when we're doing solo content, we're taking the Lover Munda stone for that extra spell and physical penetration. When doing content as part of a group, we'll be taking the Thief Munda stone for extra critical rating, and for our food, we're taking the Aetherium takeaway broth to increase our health recovery, max stamina, and stamina recovery. You can pick these up at a guild vendor or make it yourself if you have the recipe at a cooking station. If that's a little too pricey, you can also use the dubious Cameronian throne. The stats are slightly lower and it doesn't give health recovery, but it's a very small difference, and overall it doesn't matter which one you use. For our potions, we're using Essence of Weapon Power, which grants us major brutality, major savagery, major endurance, and it restores some stamina immediately. We'll be using these for those longer and tougher fights. We can grab these at a guild vendor or make them at an alchemy station. If you haven't got any on you at the time, you can always pop a Essence of Stamina instead. They will give us major endurance and restore some stamina immediately. They might not be as useful as weapon power potions, but they are better than nothing, and they do tend to drop for almost every mob in Tamriel, so your bag will probably be full of them. Moving on to the gear now, we have the option to use a Maelstrom Greatsword and Pale Order Ring on this build. They aren't necessary by any means, and we have options in their stead, which we'll go over first. We're using 7 medium armor pieces on this build, all with the Divine's trait and a stamina enchant, and for our jewellery we're using the Bloodthirsty trait and a weapon damage enchant. For our weapons, we're using dual daggers for our front bar. Our main hand will be a Nirnhond with a poison enchant, and our offhand will be charged with a fire enchant. For our back bar, we're taking a two-handed greatsword with the infused trait and a weapon damage enchant. Moving on to the sets themselves, starting with the body pieces, which are the chest, waist, hands, legs and feet. Our first choice is a trial set, and it's the Arms of Reliquant set. This set is gotten from Cloud Rest, and on veteran difficulty you can get a perfected version, which adds extra stamina to the set. It's a minor increase compared to the unperfected version, so it doesn't matter which version you use. The set itself gives us critical chance, minor slayer at all times, and our light and heavy attacks add a stacking damage over time effect to our targets. That lasts for 5 seconds and it stacks up to 10 times. If you haven't stepped into a trial or you want to use something else, you can use the Aegis Caller set, which is gotten in the DLC Unhallowed Grave Dungeon. This set adds weapon and spell damage, stamina recovery, and when you deal critical damage with a martial melee attack, you'll summon a lesser Aegis for 11 seconds, which will deal bleed damage every 1 second. You can also use the Briarhearth set, which is gotten from Hrothgar Overland content, such as delves, world bosses, and public dungeons. You can also pick it up at a guild vendor. Briarheart comes with critical chance and maximum stamina, and when you deal critical damage, your weapon and spell damage will increase for 10 seconds, and while the effect is active, you'll heal when you do critical damage. For our weapons and jewellery, we're going with the Pillar of Nirn set, which is gotten from the DLC dungeon Valkyrie Hold, which gives us maximum stamina, critical chance, and weapon and spell damage. And when you deal damage, you'll deal bleed damage to the target enemy and enemies near the target, and causing them to take bleed damage for 10 seconds. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. For our monster sets, for our helm and shoulder slots, we have 2 choices. We can use the Bloodspawn set. The helm can be gotten from Spindle Clutch 2 on veteran, and the shoulders can be gotten from an Undaunted vendor. This set adds stamina recovery, and when we take damage we have a chance to gain extra ultimate and to increase our resistances by 3601 for 5 seconds. Another good choice is the Stormfist set from Tempest Island. Again, the helm from veteran difficulty and the shoulder from an Undaunted vendor. Stormfist adds stamina recovery, and when you deal damage you have a chance to summon a giant fist to close around the enemy, dealing shock damage every 1 second for 3 seconds to all enemies within 4 meters. When the fist closes, it does a large amount of physical damage. Now for the Ring of the Pale Order, which is gotten from the Antiquity system. When using this, we'll heal for 20% of all the damage we do. We can't be healed by anyone but ourselves, and the healing we do does decrease when we're in groups. The ring will take up a ring slot, and so we'll need to wear one of our jewellery pieces on our shoulder or helm instead. The slot doesn't matter. We will lose the 2-set bonus from the monster set, but we'll make up for it from the healing from the payload or ring. You can stick with the Bloodspawn or Stormfist set for the 1-piece bonus, or you could also use the Magma Incarnate set. The head is found in the Dreadseller DLC dungeon on Veteran, and a shoulder from Undaunted vendor if you prefer to use that piece instead. The Magma Incarnate's first set bonus will give us magic and stamina recovery. Lastly is the Maelstrom 2-handed sword, which is gotten from the Maelstrom Arena, and we'll be using this in our back bar. There is a perfected version from the Veteran difficulty of the arena, which adds extra offensive penetration. It doesn't matter which version we use, as we're more interested in the base effect, which is when dealing damage with critical charge, we cause enemies to bleed for over 10 seconds. With the arena weapon out of the way, that covers all the gear, and now it's time for the skills. Starting with the front bar, first skill up is Blood Craze. Morph this from Twin Slashes, and it's found in the Jewel skill line. This will deal bleed damage and cause the enemy to bleed for 20 seconds, and it heals you over its duration. We are also using Barb Trap, morphed from Trap Beast, and can be found in the Fighter's Guild skill line. The trap deals bleed damage and causes the enemy to bleed for 20 seconds, and it also grants us Minor Force, and it can also immobilize enemies for 2 seconds as well. We're also using Surprise Attack, which is morphed from Veiled Strike and found in the Shadow skill line. This slashes an enemy dealing physical damage, and it applies the Sundered status effect. If you attack from the flank, you'll also knock them off balance, and it's also guaranteed critical hit up to once every 4 seconds. We are using Relentless Focus, which is more from the Grim Focus, which is found in the Assassination skill tree. This will increase our weapon and spell damage when doing a light or heavy attack up to 5 times. When we hit 5 stacks, it'll become Assassin's Scourge, which can then be used for half its cost, will deal immense disease damage, and it heals us if we're within melee range. Next up is Twisting Path, more from Path of Darkness, and found in the Shadow skill line. You'll create a corridor for 12 seconds that gives yourselves and your allies major expedition, and also deals magic damage to enemies that stand in it. For the ultimate, we're using Incapacitating Strike, more from Deathstroke, and can be found in the Assassination skill line. You'll deal disease damage to an enemy and cause them to take 20% more damage for 6 seconds. If you cast it while you have more than 120 ultimate, you'll stun the enemy, and while slotted, we restore magic and stamina if we light or heavy attack an enemy with a negative effect on them. Next, we'll move on to the back bar skills, starting with Stampede. This is more from Critical Charge, which is found in the 2-handed skill line. You'll charge an enemy and deal physical damage to them and nearby enemies. This is always a critical strike. You'll also leave an AoE under their feet for 15 seconds that deals physical damage. And also, if you're using the arena weapon, you'll also add a bleed dot to the enemy as well. Next is Carve, which is more from Cleave, which is found in the 2-handed skill line. You'll deal bleed damage to enemies in front of you and cause them to bleed for 12 seconds. Hitting the enemy again will increase the duration, and you can increase it all the way up to 32 seconds. This also gives us a damage shield. Next up is Resolving Vigor, more from Vigor, and found in the Assault skill line. This will cause you to heal over 5 seconds, and you'll also gain Minor Resolve. We're also using Razor Caltrops, more from Caltrops, and found in the Assault skill line. This is an AoE that deals physical damage to enemies standing in it for 10 seconds, as well as slowing their movement speed by 50%, as well as applying major breach to those enemies as well. Next is Dark Shade. This is more from Summon Shade and is found in the Shadow skill line. You'll summon a shade of yourself that attacks enemies for 22 seconds. It does magic damage and occasionally does AoEs as well, and it also inflicts minor maim to the enemies. Now, the ultimate on the back bar is the exact same as the front bar, which is again Incapacitating Strike. This is more from Deathstroke and that can be found in the Assassination skill line. So that covers all of the skills, so now let's go over the passives, starting with our class passives. First up is the Assassination skill line. In here we want to take Master Assassin, Executioner, Pressure Points, and Hemorrhage. And in the Shadow skill line we'll be taking Refreshing Shadows, Shadow Barrier, Dark Vigor, and Dark Veil. And onto the Siphoning skill line. In here we're only going to be taking the Catalyst passive because we're not using any siphoning skills, so none of the other passives are going to activate. We are using Dual Daggers, so we'll take everything in the Dual Wheel skill line. These are Slaughter, Dual Wheel Expert, Control Fury, Ruffian, and Twin Blade and Blunt. Next is the Two-handed skill line. Again, we'll take everything. This includes Forceful, Heavy Weapons, Balanced Blade, Follow Up, and Battle Rush. We are wearing a full set of medium armor, so we'll take everything in the medium armor skill line, which are Dexterity, Windwalker, Improved Sneak, Agility, and Athletics. We are using Fighter Guild skills, so in the Fighters Guild skill line we'll be taking Intimidating Presence, Slayer, Banish the Wicked, and Skill Tracker. And next up is the Undaunted passives. In here we'll be taking Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. Next up is Continuous Attack, which can be found in the Assault skill line. This is an optional passive. However, you only need to use 1 point to activate the Major Gallop skill that comes from this. You don't really get anything extra from adding the second point to it, as that's mostly for PvP in places like Imperial City or Cyrodiil. Now, if you do plan on doing Imperial City or Cyrodiil, you can add the second point, you might get some use out of it. However, just stick with 1 point for now. Moving on to the racial passives, these are very specific to your race. You will need to grab everything, but you're also going to need to read over everything to understand them, as every race has different passives that give different bonuses and advantages, so you do kind of need to know what you're dealing with. I do also have some of the suggestions I called out earlier on the screen as we speak. And lastly, one more optional passive, which I would class as necessary, and it's medicinal use, which is found in the alchemy skill line. This causes our potions to last much longer and makes our potions outlast their cooldown, so you can always have a potion active. And that's also everything for our passives. So next up is the champion points. And we're going to begin in the warfare tree. In here we want Wrathful Strikes to increase weapon and spell damage, we want Fighting Finesse to increase our critical damage and healing, we also want Deadly Aim to increase our single target damage attacks, and we also want to grab Thaumaturge to increase our damage over time attacks. In the fitness tree skill line, we want to take Boundless Vitality to increase our health, we also want to take Fortify to increase our armor, as well as Rejuvenation for increased sustain. We'll also be taking Bloody Renewal to help get back stamina when we kill an enemy. In the craft tree skill line, it'll mostly be down to your own choice, as nothing here really impacts the build, and it's mostly down to your playstyle. But when I'm soloing, I like to take Treasure Hunter to increase the quality of items I find in chests, I also like to grab Rationeer to increase my food duration, and I also like to take Liquid Efficiency to give myself a small chance to not consume a potion or poison when I use it. I also like to grab Steed's Blessing to increase my out of combat movement speed, to get around a bit quicker and to kind of, solo things a bit faster. But that does cover everything for the champion point slottables, and it's also everything for the Shade builds. Now I hope this video was helpful in some way, or at least gave you an idea or two for your own builds, and if it did, why not hit the like button? If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or just want to have a chat, please comment below. I do enjoy talking to you, I do also get good ideas from you guys, and I also learn a thing or two that I really didn't consider or knew myself. If you're looking for more videos like this, you should definitely subscribe. I do have more builds and MMO content on the channel, and I also have more on the way. You can also come chat to me in real time over on Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy, where you can catch me playing ESO and other MMOs live. I'm also happy to answer questions there, and to just generally have a chat. Maybe you'll learn something new from my live streams, or maybe you'll just kill some time and have a laugh. The more time I spend with you guys, the better. And as always, I appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching the video, and please guys, as always, take care of yourselves and keep being awesome.